back to Drones in America by MarketScale. I'm your host, Grant Giat, and I lead the Unmanned Aircraft Systems practice team at the law firm of Adams and Reese. Today, I am joined by the largest drone manufacturer in America, Skydio. Specifically, I'm joined by Skydio's CEO and founder, Adam Bree, as well as its head of regulatory and policy affairs, Brendan Groves. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
And thanks for having us. I'm super excited to be here.
Likewise.
Absolutely. So you guys started in 2014, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So after MIT, my co-founders and I worked at Google for a year and a half. We helped start Google's drone program, and then started Skydio in 2014.
You know, I bet year after year you were watching and waiting for some substantial regulatory developments and other advancements in order to see this technology really take off. And here we are in 2020, and I think needless to say, it's kind of a big year. So it's got to be rewarding for you, who's been doing this for a minimum of 6 years, to finally see some movement.
Yeah, well, look, I've always been pretty optimistic. I think you kind of have to be when you start a company. I mean, I think that the regulatory trend line, from my perspective, has been very positive. Like when we were at Google in 2012, people were afraid the FAA was just going to shut the whole thing down. There was going to be no drone industry. And that's not at all what's happened. There's been kind of a nice incremental path with waivers, and then those waivers kind of getting codified into regulations, and then new sets of waivers on top. And it may not be happening as fast as some people would like. But, I think there's real concerns out there about safety and other things. And the trend line, I think, has been positive. And I think you're also right that we're getting to a pretty exciting point now where I still think it's very early. I still think we're at a tiny fraction of the drone use that we'll ultimately see as autonomy really becomes prevalent and as the regulations come to reflect that. But we're at a point now where there's a lot of companies, big enterprises, medium, small businesses doing all kinds of interesting, useful stuff with drones.
I certainly agree. Now, Brendan, let's shift to you. You have both a military and a legal background. So how did you come to end up at Skydio?
Sure. Well, I would love to say that I'm as nerdy as Adam was and grew up flying RC airplanes. I did grow up fascinated by flight and actually earned my pilot's license in high school. And then before joining the company, I had a decade-long career in the federal government that revolved around aviation and technology policy and national security, beginning, as you said, as an officer in the Air Force, where I had the really great opportunity to be sort of on the vanguard of the unmanned revolution in the defense world and advise commanders and pilots of remotely piloted aircraft conducting operations all over the world. So that was really a fantastic experience. I then later went to the Department of Justice, where I had the chance to develop and then lead and then scale their program. And in the course of that experience, I realized that we in the Department of Justice and our enterprise colleagues who were developing drone programs at the time, this is a few years ago, we needed two things. We needed autonomy and we needed security. We needed drones that wouldn't crash. We needed drones that would let our frontline personnel, no matter what they were doing, conducting a mission or conducting an inspection, we needed drones that would let them focus on the mission while the drone focused on the flying. And the second was equally important. We needed drones that would secure our data, which is sensitive, of course, and that applies not only to government uses, but also enterprise uses. So there were only a handful, if that, of companies that met both requirements. And so the opportunity to join Skydio is really an opportunity to help catapult a company that meets both of those core requirements, which are really central to both, again, enterprise users and on the public sector.
And I want to go back to something that Adam brought up, and of course you also mentioned, Brendan, that's autonomy. The fact that we're talking about an autonomous drone solution. People in the industry, especially people in the public, but even some people who are a little bit more involved in the industry, somewhat confuse the terms unmanned and autonomous, and not realizing those are in fact two very different things. And while having an unmanned system, of course, is fantastic, having an autonomous system really takes it to the next level. Adam, I'm going to let you speak on that. How important is it to emphasize the benefits of autonomy with this technology that Skydio has developed?
Well, look, I think in the long run, I think it's going to be everything. I mean, we have a perspective on this as a company, and this is where we've made massive investments. But if you just look at, you can look at sort of the trajectory of other categories of devices that kind of go through these transitions to software defined experiences. So in the early days of the PC industry, they were, you had to be an expert kind of hacker programmer to do anything. Everything happened at the command prompt. And then there was the transition to the graphical user interface with the first Mac, with Windows, and it just totally changed the paradigm. It's a software defined experience. It's accessible to way more people. It's much easier to use. It's application specific. And then with phones, I think we see a similar thing. In the mid 2000s, we went from kind of hardware centric devices with limited functionality to software defined devices with basically unlimited functionality. And that's really what we think autonomy means for drones. It turns it into a software defined experience, and software is inherently scalable. If you can get software to work for a particular application, that becomes available to anyone, anywhere, anytime for them to use it. And that's what you can see with some of the announcements that we made this week. So one of the products that we announced is House Scan. So residential roof inspection is an application that people have been talking about doing with drones for years now, but nobody's been able to do it scalably because it's a very challenging task to fly a drone in close to a roof, capture all the data you need, not crash into anything. And that's something that we fully automated. You basically tap on the house, the drone uses its onboard AI to recognize it. It scans every facet, and it just totally changes the paradigm. And similarly with 3D Scan, another product that we announced this week, another software product. We show this inspecting a bridge where you basically say, here's the volume of the thing that I want to look at. The drone uses its onboard intelligence to figure out, where it should go. It captures all the data you need to assess damage, reconstruct a 3D model. And as exciting as those products are, and I think they really are incredibly exciting, they're really meaningful thing for those industries. It's still just the tip of the iceberg. I think that the thing that people don't understand about autonomy is that there's a lot of layers. Every layer builds on the last one, and there's just this continually expanding set of capabilities. And the better they get, the more you can trust them, the more of them you can do.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some press announcements that came out this week. You had not one, not two, but really it sounds like at least three major press announcements, game changing for the industry. And I want to talk about that. And I guess I'll turn this one over to Brendan. Let's start with you about this. I mentioned three announcements, and Adam kind of just hinted on one of them, some software for roof inspections and other applications that's certainly going to improve efficiency and operations among end user industries. Really, I want to hear about the X2 family of drones, which of course was another huge announcement that you guys came out with earlier this week. So Brendan, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm happy to kick it off, but this is really an exciting evolution in the Skydio product line. So beginning with the R1, which Adam and company released in 2018, that proved the possibility and the power of autonomous flight, which was built on in the Skydio 2, which really brought that to market, experienced incredible levels of adoption in the consumer space and really organic adoption across the enterprise sector as well as the public sector. Skydio X2 builds on that foundation, but takes it to the next level. It's ruggedized, portable, folding frame with much longer flight time, but that same core autonomy architecture, the Skydio autonomy core, that allows you to focus on your mission while your drone focuses on the flying. But now it flies a lot longer, and it has a lot more powerful capabilities than any other sort of product on the market. And I think it's directly responsive, certainly the needs that I saw when I was in public service and had the opportunity to help oversee the integration of drones into the national airspace, serving on the FAA U.S. Executive Committee. We saw the need for products like this that would inherently improve airspace safety, and Skydio X2 has the power to do that across the enterprise sector and conduct lots of things that people have been talking about for a decade or more, but haven't really come to fruition because there's been no way to conduct them sort of safely at scale. But the X2 family of drones has the chance to change that.
And then looking at the material you guys have posted, it looks like, while Skydio is always had a mind to certainly help businesses utilize drones. It especially looks like X2 is a scalable product, or rather it's a product that really increases scalability and that could appeal to a wide range of end user industries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the customer conversations that fed into the design of X2 were pretty wide ranging. We talked to folks in public safety, a lot of high-end enterprise inspection, security kind of use cases, as well as government use cases, from search and rescue to defense, and we saw sort of a convergence of needs that led us to develop the product, and it's an incredibly capable, powerful platform. It builds on the same core autonomy foundation, but as Brendan said, it's kind of the enterprise bigger brother.
Thanks, Adam. And I actually want to move on to another huge announcement you guys made this week. Normally when people think COVID-19, the time period we're living in, they think people pinching pennies, really experiencing economic hardships. But Skydio amazingly was able to complete a $100 million fundraising round, which is remarkable, especially given the times we're in right now. I mean, $100 million is not a small piece of change. So Adam, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that it is a really challenging time for us as a country and really the whole world. And we're impacted as well. We've been working from home. Our ability to manufacture drones was paused briefly because of California shelter in place. And I think it's something that we're all struggling through. I think as a company, we're extremely fortunate that we have the products and the momentum that we do, and that the fundraising, I think, is a nice validation of the opportunity that's there and the progress that we've made as a company from the investor community, and we're excited about it. And I think this is one of the largest, if not the largest, fundraising rounds by a drone company. And the stuff that we're most excited about is the customer success and the product. But I think all of it together, we're really challenging the myth that I think people built up over the last few years that American companies can't succeed in the space, which, we of course never believed. And I think the opportunity for a new and different kind of product that's software centric, that meets the need of consumer, enterprise, and government customers is really, really clear. And we're seeing that with our customers, and investors are seeing it and believing it too now.
It certainly is, if not the largest, one of the largest fundraising rounds I've seen lately. And it's a testament to the faith that investors have in you guys' products and where the industry is headed. And you mentioned, Adam, about the fact that it's an American manufactured product and how that kind of adds to the remarkability of the fundraising round. We have seen the United States government really kind of pay a lot of attention, especially lately, to the whole issue of Chinese or any country foreign source drones compared to American manufactured products. And I've actually had this discussion with several people in our industry. A mutual friend of Brendan and mine, and you may know her too, Dawn Zolda, and I both authored articles on this foreign source drone phenomenon, I guess you could say. And what we both kind of came to the conclusion of is we see certain foreign source drones kind of taking a Nokia role and being like a Nokia product. No offense to Nokia, it's just we all remember having Nokia cell phones, and now the vast majority of us don't. Many of us have Apple products. Of course, there's also Android and others as well, but it's almost like Skydio is positioning itself to be an Apple-like company, which is pretty amazing to see. Brendan, what emphasis do you guys put on the fact when you're marketing your products that this is homegrown in America?
We certainly do emphasize that, but we spend most of our time talking about the power of autonomy, and that's true with respect to consumer customers. It's certainly true for enterprise customers, and it's definitely true for public sector companies. There has been an awakening, I suppose, with respect to the risk presented to Internet of Things devices, and drones in the last 5 years have joined the Internet of Things. This is the web of devices that work best when connected to networks. And drones are certainly that. They're designed to connect to networks. And so we've seen in the enterprise and also in the public sector an awareness that drones present a potential cybersecurity threat, so they should be carefully evaluated to mitigate any of those risks. We've also seen an awareness that products, made in China or made by companies based in China may present unique and concerning levels of risk. So those two trend lines exist sort of independent of the drone industry, but they've sort of impacted now, and you're seeing them really come to light. So Skydio is certainly well positioned to meet those needs. We have extremely high levels of cybersecurity and supply chain security because we do make our products in the United States, and we carefully source the components in those products. And that's why we become a trusted vendor to major enterprises as well as public sector entities. But I think you're going to see this, and you have seen this, well outside of the drone space. The drone space is really just sort of one microcosm of this broader awakening.
And people certainly, and I don't know if it's because of the news stories that have been circulating lately. Of course, not just drone related, but I've really noticed a trend in people being proud of owning American-made, technology, American-made devices. And I think Skydio is going to be no exception. And along those lines, this is going to be a very big year, as both of you know, for the regulatory environment for drones. We have at least a couple big rules coming out, supposedly at the end of this year. The FAA is confident we'll have those rules come out. We have the final rule on ops over people and during night, and as well as, of course, remote identification. Adam, how do you see remote identification affecting Skydio's success levels?
So I think that remote ID is one of these kind of core ingredients that needs to be in place to really have scalable drone use, especially for professional enterprise and public sector use. So it's something that in general we're very excited and supportive of. And I think that from my kind of my personal perspective, but this is just generally true, like pure anonymity is usually bad for responsible use. And so some form of being able to tie particular drones to particular operators from an accountability standpoint, from a tracking standpoint, I think is really important. Now there's a lot of technical details about how we actually pull that off. It's not a simple problem, and I empathize with the folks that are tasked with sort of navigating all the details there. And it's something that we've participated in as a company. And one of the things that we're always looking to do is make sure that as much as we can, we're informing the folks that are making these decisions about what's coming from a technology perspective over the next 2 to 3 years, 2 to 5 years maybe, because I think there's a tendency to sort of craft regulations from the status quo today without thinking about what might be possible in a world where drones are capable of navigating completely visually and may not have GPS all the time, or they're capable of flying in a trustworthy way and avoiding obstacles better than a person could. And so, I think there's room to have those conversations with the folks that are making decisions. That's something that we're always interested in doing. But in general, I'm excited about about remote ID. I think it's a necessary thing. It's a healthy thing for the industry.
And I think it's also going to help improve public perception of drones, which of course is a huge aspect of the industry moving forward. We absolutely need to have public acceptance. I actually was on a quote unquote meeting this morning, because we're all meeting by Zoom right now, with the FAA, with the client, discussing the importance of taking drones out into the streets and showing the public what they are, what they can do, letting members of the public hold a drone. Actually realize that it's not necessarily some nefarious, evil, villainous device, but it actually can remarkably improve your life. Brendan, how important is community outreach to Skydio's marketing efforts and how it wants to see its products move this industry forward?
Right. We think about it in terms of trust. So on the product side, as Adam said, we want to build products that are inherently trustworthy, products that are perfectly capable of flying themselves with little to no human input. That's what we've certainly done with the Skydio 2 and now the Skydio X2. But the next evolution is really ensuring that the public has the same level of trust that the product does by its operator. You need both in order for the industry to truly grow, to truly scale. And we think about this in terms of, again, building products that inherently build trust because they work well, they don't crash, but also with taking firm positions that advance responsible use that is necessary to build and maintain public trust. So Skydio has done this in a unique way. So as you may have seen earlier this week, Skydio released a first of a kind set of policy and ethical principles called the Skydio Engagement and Responsible Use Framework. To our knowledge, we're the first drone company to do that. It's because responsible use is at the core of who we are as a company. And we see that that's a real potential impediment for the industry as a whole, but it's also an opportunity because we do think that this technology, especially autonomy technology, will earn the public's trust, and we want to help make that true. So you're going to see a lot more of that from Skydio, taking not only product design decisions that build trust, but working with external stakeholders from governments to civil society organizations to industry associations to advance the laws and the standards and the policies that will over time, build community support, not only domestically, but around the world.
And echoing on that, when I was on the phone this morning with an FAA official, they were discussing the importance of letting state and local government leaders know what drones are, know what they can do, because there are so many different levels of understanding of what unmanned aircraft systems are. You have many people who are catching on and realizing all the end user industries that are maximizing the utilization of this technology and achieving those benefits. But then you unfortunately still have a large part of society that, when they think of drones, they think these movies where the villain at the end unleashes his choice of weapon and it's a drone. And it's not just action movies. I mean, it was even my kids and I, we watched Sonic the Hedgehog recently. And, I didn't think there'd be another movie where drones ended up being the villain. But sure enough, the main bad guy unleashes this form of drones. This is a real problem for America. And, I think the fact that Skydio, like I said, is homegrown, but also that you guys do focus on safety and autonomy at the same time, and you are committed to getting the positive message out there. I think that's, a unique combination that inevitably is going to contribute and is already contributing to you guys' success.
Yeah, I think that, new technologies are always tricky. And I think that there's some amount of just healthy civilizational skepticism that comes along with new technologies, because we don't know what it's going to, we don't know what it means exactly. Sometimes you can see the misuse and abuse vectors before you can see the positive benefits. I don't know who said this exactly, but I heard somebody say, if the automobile was invented today, it would be banned immediately. Mm-hmm. And I think that's likely true. I mean, the things are like, they're
we would
giant.
Still be riding horses. Yeah,
like if you think of like the impact a car has, like the amount of pollution it causes, the number of people that die in car accidents, it's just like on a completely different scale, arguably in terms of risk reward to other things that are newer. But people are naturally hesitant of new stuff. I'm an optimist here again. I think that there's so many useful things that drones can do. Like if you imagine a world where drones are responding to 911 calls to provide critical information to first responders to make better decisions, where they're inspecting all of our critical infrastructure in near real time and used to monitor forestry, and used to track construction projects and keep them on track and monitor crops. I mean, there's so many use cases where it's just clear that drones have the potential to make the world work better and be safer and make things more efficient. That, I think that as we live into those possibilities, perceptions will change. They already are changing. I think that if you ask somebody what a drone was 10 years ago, my guess is you'd get a much more negative view than what you asked today. It may not be as
Or
positive.
you think a large military vehicle?
Exactly. Yeah, it'd be a large military vehicle. Whereas now, some people might think consumer toy. Some people maybe have some notion of public sector use. But I think that I ultimately view this as something that's, what are the things we can control? And as an industry, I think making good products that deliver value for people, help the world work a little bit better. Eventually people see that. I think they already are.
I agree. And I think COVID-19 has actually presented a unique opportunity for our industry to show, really shine. And it's been a horrible time for many industries in America, aviation certainly no exception, but there is kind of a silver lining. And, a few market strategists have talked about this. This has presented an opportunity for our industry to show what we can do. From test deliveries to inspections, just all things. Drones by their nature are social distancers. So it all, it all kind of is presenting an opportunity. We're almost out of time, but before we go, I'd like one of you to talk about your participation in the integration pilot program, which I think is so important because it kind of ties together everything we talked about, state and local government working together with industry to drive this industry forward.
Yeah, I'll let Brendan take that. I mean, he's been on the front lines of this for a while.
So, the IPP is actually the perfect example of getting state and local governments involved in advancing the frontiers of unmanned flight, right? That's the whole premise of the IPP, which was a genius idea between the White House and the FAA. So Skydio is a member of 2 IPPs where we're really pushing the boundaries and getting approval right now, for operations that will make drones much more useful. So we're a member of the San Diego IPP with our partners, the Chula Vista Police Department. And within the last 2 weeks, we are proud to announce the receipt of a path-breaking waiver for the Chula Vista Police Department, earned in coordination with Skydio, that allows them to fly drones in close proximity and at low altitude to enhance public safety in Chula Vista in a way that builds public trust. This is, as far as we know, perhaps the first FAA waiver that allows beyond visual line of sight flights without a visual observer or the use of really expensive and really cumbersome ground-based surveillance. And you're going to see us, I think, advance the same sort of premise under Part 107, where it has just phenomenal possibilities for enterprise users that want to inspect their infrastructure and fly right behind, for instance, a bridge pylon. They would want to conduct those operations too. So a lot of promising breakthroughs there. And we obviously have really appreciated working closely with the FAA, and you're going to see a lot more of this in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Brendan. The FAA has been fantastic in encouraging these kinds of partnerships. And, I think what a lot of people in our industry don't realize, there's so much work that needs to be done on the state and local level, because once you secure the confidence of those government decision makers and the constituents living in those areas, we are far more likely to be able to help the FAA move this regulatory environment forward. So Skydio certainly is doing its part in helping that happen. We're out of time, but I want to thank both of you gentlemen for appearing today. I'm looking forward to the time where when I ask someone what kind of drone they have, at least half the time it'll be Skydio instead of another company. I'm hearing it more and more, which is great to see. And I think with the X2 family, the new software, the $100 million fundraise, you guys are just knocking out of the park, and I'm excited to see you guys do it. So thanks for being on the program. Brendan Groves and Adam Bree, do you guys have anything else you'd like to close with?
No, this has been great, Grant. I really appreciate you having us on. It's fun to talk about the products and the market and everything. I think, probably the last thing I'd say is I hope everybody out there is as optimistic and as excited as we are about the industry. Because I think there's great things happening today, but it's still very early days. The products, the technology, everything's getting better. The use cases are still getting developed. I think this is just the most exciting time in the world to be working on this stuff, and we're fortunate to be a part of it.
Great, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks again to Skydio for joining us today, and tune in next week for Drones in America by MarketScale.